for you.
And there we go. You see the quality went a bit down.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get started. So, good morning. I am joined today by Sarah Rapp. She's originally from Germany, but she has a very global mindset. And I had the pleasure of working with her for an international organization working with education all around the world for a period of time. And Sarah is also the host and founder of a podcast called How to Be Global. Check it out. We will leave a little link below as well. But Sarah, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Excited on your podcast and talk about great things, cross culture, working with different people, and yeah, all of that.
Yeah, you have a lot of experience. And now, like for Job Squad, we are based in Europe, and we are Europe based because when you're talking about getting new jobs, there's all this paperwork and visas and all of that. But Sarah, you are actually working global. Can you maybe tell a little bit about what you do?
For sure. So you already mentioned like paperwork and taxes and all the amazing things, which are really complicated in your own country, let alone going global, right? So what I do is I work for an organization called JA Worldwide, and Linda and I, we are both alumni of the program because back in school we both created, not in the same school because obviously Linda was in Denmark, I was in Germany. We created our first own startup. And after that, we joined the alumni network, and it's all about going back to the schools, helping the kids experience this entrepreneurial mindset, but also really teach the kids how do you create a business, right? Because these are things nobody learns in school. And I think this experience brought both of us outside of our comfort zone and then also outside of our, borders where we grew up. Yeah, and I work for the global headquarters. We are in 110, even more countries to come around the world. And what we offer is exactly these programs in schools for the kids, no matter, what age group they are. We have different programs, or no matter where they are in their life. And we offer these programs for them to really experience what it is to create your own company and hopefully, create jobs in the future.
Oh, that is super cool. And now you've been working with JA, both in Europe and now on a global scale. How was that a part of why you started this podcast, or where did the podcast How to Be Global come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I knew that I want to leave Germany since I'm like 16 years old. Don't ask me why. I just felt like I don't really fit, but I couldn't really. Well, back then I didn't say that, but something felt like wrong. I'm like, I think this is not the place I want to be. So I wanted to actually go to the US when I was 16. My mom wasn't amused. She didn't let me go to the US when I was 16. So then I studied in Germany, actually didn't go abroad, but when I was working in a sports federation back in Germany, I was always the person who was dealing with all the international people. We had like big sport events, and basically everyone who wasn't German was like sent to me. And this is when I started to experience how cool it is to work with people from other cultures. Then obviously with JA in the alumni network, especially in the European alumni network, you meet so many different people from different countries. And when you don't know people from other cultures, you might think, oh, they're very different, or I don't know. But actually, we're so similar, right? There's obviously like different languages and different values and different backgrounds. But at the end of the day, if you go into like these like-minded groups, for example, everyone who's interested in entrepreneurship, you find out that everyone is very aligned and very similar. So this was the European level. And then obviously since 3 years, I'm working on a very global level. And what I found out is that it's amazing, first of all, right? It's really cool. You get to know new cultures and people, but here's the big but. Nobody, well, not nobody, but not a lot of people are actually helping you. How the hell are you like, how does this work? Like, how can it be a global person? How is this going? And so this is where I found myself 3 years ago, like throwing into this global world, working with different cultures, no clue how that works. And then I tried to find resources, anything. And obviously, but it was
I think we're experiencing a little bit of delay. I'm not sure if you
start
can
how to
hear
be
me.
global.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, I'm not sure we catch the last sentence you just said.
Okay, let me. Oh my gosh, that's right. Okay, go again. So working on this global level, I really wanted to find out how this works, but there were really not a lot of places where you can actually learn about this. And there was not one place, like a one-stop shop where you learn this. And this is why I started How to Be Global, to find that out, right? And I started the podcast, and I'm talking to a lot of different people from different areas, everyone who's kind of considered themselves as a global citizen, right? In various different areas, and really just trying to see how other people do it. And yeah, soon I'm hopefully also going to offer much more than the podcast, maybe like coachings on how to work abroad, you guys do in Europe, but more focused on like how to work across with different cultures in one place, and many more things to come.
Oh, that is super exciting. No, I remember when you told me about the podcast the first time around, and in the beginning I was like, okay, like, I never even though I've had these issues, like I always was told like, oh, your generation, you're so global, and we are, and as you're mentioning, we are not that different, especially when it comes to interest. I mean, everybody who's interested in dance can talk about that, and then maybe it doesn't matter where you're coming from or you name it. But I also experienced kind of the opposite, where everybody always told me, "Oh, you're the young generation, just within Europe, you're all the same, you're all international, you all speak English." And then being thrown into working international, I actually experienced that we still got a bit of differences, like when it comes to how we work together, what we expect out of a meeting, how we have a meeting. And I remember thinking about that when you told me about how to be global. And I was like, okay, that would be amazing. Can you just write a how to guideline, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
No, I mean, this, I mean, in my head, that was the plan, right? To have like, okay, I'm going to interview a lot of people who have the same struggles, and then we will find the solution. Guess what? There is no one solution, obviously, because it's so different. I think the most important thing is to have an open mind, right? Because obviously we all have stereotypes, and they're totally normal, right? Right? They're not right or wrong, right? It's there. Sometimes we think of, I don't know, the Italian always late, the Germans always want to be on time. I don't know, these like stereotypes. But it's important that if you go into a room or you work with people from different cultures, that you kind of don't think of right or wrong necessarily. It's just like different, right? You go into the room like, okay, reset whatever I think is right, and then just like open your mind and be like, okay, let's see what the other people bring to the table, how this works, and then also ask many more questions than if you would work with someone from your own culture, because so many things people take for granted, like it's just a standard in, let's say, Germany to do X, but obviously that is not a standard in other countries, so you have to ask many more questions instead of getting insane or doesn't deliver anything, instead of getting offended, just asking like, oh, do you do this differently? Like, what's the reason behind it, right? And to like really go through in a bit deeper with communication.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. But then a question just coming to my mind as well. That's something I really want to discuss with you today about. But is it worth it? I mean, it sounds like a lot of work to I could just stay at home in Denmark, and everybody thinks the same way almost. And, we have the same kind of meetings, takeaways from a meeting. We have the same backgrounds. We're all educated to eat the same way and speak the same way. Is it worth it, all this effort?
That's a great question. So the answer is obviously yes. To say yes. So I think honestly, the fact right now is we are all global citizens. If we want to, there's no such thing as like, I don't want to be global, because everybody wants to take the advantages of the globalization. Everybody wants to have that iPhone. Everybody wants to have like the mango or the avocado, or people have. Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you. Yes, go on.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. So everybody wants to have like the mango, which is most probably not growing in Denmark, or wants to have all these things which the globalization brings. But then when it comes to like working with color cultures or the refugee crisis, what everybody says, everybody's like, oh no, I don't have to do anything with this global things, right? So I feel like it's a hard thing, because it's a mindset shift, and to shift like behaviors and whatever takes forever. But the world is getting more and more global. People travel across culture. Imagine now with COVID, almost everyone works remote. And the recruiters, I mean, like you guys, even companies, they will hire the people wherever they are. They do not in the future necessarily fly them to their office because so many companies do not even have offices anymore. So naturally, like the workforce in the world will be much more diverse. So, and you can now say, okay, I don't want to have to do anything with this. But at the end of the day, you will be faced with those challenges, right? So you better have something or someone who prepares you for those, right? Instead of just like wanting to go back into your own bubble. So this is obviously there are like a lot of different views on this, right? There are people like you and I who really enjoy going out there with different cultures. That's like one part. And then there are the people who are like don't really want it, but that is the reality and it will grow much more in the future. So yeah, the answer is yes, it's needed.
Oh, it's funny that you're mentioning about food, for instance, because I guess that the whole gram of that actually started with the sugar, I guess. Like, that's 400, almost 500 years ago that we started being reliant on sugar that came from the other side of the world, and we needed workforce. And well, then the whole slavery, we're not going to talk about that because it's definitely a bad part of history. But we already got used to having these things from all around the world. So I like how you're kind of implementing that in the thought. Like, even though you don't feel like you're that global, you're reliant on stuff that's coming from the other side of the world. um Oh, I think it's such a cool subject, and I think we could talk about it so long. But now, since I have you as a specialist in this subject, I really want to ask you some questions, because we are still, now you mentioned that the workforce might change, but we are still actually flying people around to these offices. And one of the reasons we're doing that is because really big companies, they might don't have the resources, or they don't want to put the money into raising their own customer service department in 10, 15 different languages, which is needed here in Europe. So companies like Microsoft and Google and all these big ones, they're hiring other companies to kind of gather all the customer service agents and specialize in this, and then have them in all kind of languages. So these
Mhm.
work environments that we are introducing people to are often really international. Now, I don't want to say global because we are still restricted from
Yeah.
within Europe, but they're really international. And I just want to hear from you, like, what do you get out of half a year or a year working in this weird, strange international environment versus staying at home for a job? Do you have anything there that you could say, like, this is definitely takeaways that you should go for, or?
Yeah, totally. So I think everyone experiences right now that you can only do so much through the screen, right? You can do a lot of things. You can connect with people from all around the world, but to actually experience who they are and what they do and how they behave, it only works in person, right? And I had the pleasure before COVID hit that I was able to travel, well, a lot in Europe, honestly, as well, to really go to the places. And then imagine if you go to a new place. So that is already a new culture where you can explore. When we go back, just simple things like the food, like how does the grocery store look like? How do you post a letter from that country to another? These are like all different things, but it's so cool because it opens your mind in so many different ways because we're used to certain things. And I remember when I moved to Malta, and I'm sure Linda, you had the same things. Sometimes you're like, oh, this is how they do it? And then sometimes it was like, oh, this is genius. And sometimes it's like, well, that doesn't make sense how they do it, right? And I think it's already this like thought of, oh, people do it differently and experience it firsthand. And this will help you so much also in your work, honestly, when you go forward, because you need to have like a flexible mind no matter what you do, right? If it's cross culture or not, it doesn't matter. But this experience to be like open to other things, more tolerant, respecting other things. This will help you in any kind of areas you go. And I think what's really cool about what you guys do when you place the candidate in a different country, but also in an international or European environment, is that they don't only have the experience of like one other country with only the locals, right? Which could feel a bit lonely if you go into like a local bubble, right? And you're the only foreigner, but you're placed into like a lot of foreigners. So you have kind of these people who go through the same thing. I'm sure you will find a lot of new friends when you go there, and I'm sure a great life experience, honestly, to like go there and experience with other foreigners together with locals, the new country, and then also like learn English better, right? Or learn another language. I mean, there's so many good things. I mean, if you can choose to do something, I would totally do that. Even if it's just for a year or 2 years and then you go back, that's totally fine. But I would totally recommend everybody to do it.
Do you have a recipe like on what is the timeline? Because I know we're talking a lot about this, like to actually experience a real culture. I mean, you can go for a holiday of 2 weeks, or you can go for a summer job of 3 months. We are always advising 6 months because then you experience like the beginning, and then you got some months where you're actually experiencing it. But what do you think? Like, do you think it has to be a year or two, or in terms of what you want to get out of it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And since I moved now twice to different countries, what I experience is obviously the first weeks are always a bit hard because it's all new. It's like all the paperwork, the new job, like how do we get to my job? So it's always a bit challenging in the beginning, which is not a bad thing, right? That's just life. And what I experience is that, like, after what you said, 3 months, you slowly start to have like your friend circles, like the people you hang out with. But after 6 months, this is honestly where you feel like, okay, I'm here, I arrived in this place and you know the thing. I mean, not all the things, but like let's say 80%, right?
Yeah.
So what I also experienced in also in Austria now, obviously it's a bit hard because of COVID. You can't really, well, we're in full lockdown in Austria and I'm not in an office, right? But if you go into an office, it's easier. So after 6 months, you kind of feel like, oh, this is my home, at least for me. And then you kind of don't want to leave that right away because you kind of worked up to like these 6 months with like the environment and then had to leave after already 6 months. Well, I think 6 months is like the minimum to experience that. But I would highly recommend to everyone to stay longer than 6 months to really then use all what you've learned from the country. And then you get into like a more of a daily routine and rhythm, which brings back like a more not normal life, but a different normal life, right? In wherever you are. So that's why I said 1 year. And then I also said, for example, when I moved to Malta, I said I'm going to stay there maximum 2 years. Well, then it was 4 years, right? So most of the time, you stay longer than you expect just because you need some time to adapt to the new country. And then you don't want to leave that right away afterwards.
No, like I totally mirror everything you said there. But both Sarah and I, just for information, we just moved during this pandemic from Malta to another European country. So Sarah ended up in Vienna in Austria, and I'm right now in the south of France. So obviously a bit of the struggle here was that it's not so open. You can't just go to cafes and meet people. You can't just go to co-working spaces, and we're both working from home. So it's a bit more closed than
Yeah.
normally. But I found myself, and this is something I'm always talking to my candidates about, homesick. Being homesick, because you mentioned that, you experience that people are doing things differently. And now this is a very strange um, scenario to mention cigarettes. But if you take a simple thing as cigarettes, which for a Danish person, you can buy in any supermarket, any kiosk, anywhere. When you come to south of Europe, you have to buy it in a tobacco. And when you come to Malta, you have to find a machine. When you're in Holland, you have to have a card to show that you're over 18 and you can buy it. So as a thing like that, and it's a strange thing to notice around, but simple things. You mentioned how to buy a stamp or a sticker.
Mhm.
Again, in Denmark, you can buy it in any store. Some places you have to go to the post office. Sometimes you have to, you know, bus tickets. Sometimes you can buy them in the bus. Sometimes it's on a mobile app. Sometimes you have to go to a store to buy a bus ticket and then go to the bus. Simple things that just makes everyday life a little bit difficult when you move abroad. And I always found myself being a bit homesick after 3-4 weeks, because that's when, okay, you arrived, you unpacked your suitcase, you're slowly starting to maybe get a little bit a view of your neighborhood, but you still haven't met your friends yet. And you also maybe started the job, so you're focused on that. But
Mhm.
some of the news worthy things of the whole moving is kind of out. Okay, a month into it, you're kind of out. But after these 3-4 weeks, I really started getting homesick. Like, you start noticing that your friends are posting on Facebook and you're not in those pictures. Things are happening where you're not anymore. Things are different. So I always struggle. Have you talked to other people? Have you experienced like this homesickness, and what do you do to get more into where you just moved, or how do you battle that?
That is it's funny because actually I never ever in my life experienced homesickness. I think I'm like most probably one of the rare people who says that because for some reason I feel at home no matter where I go. If I go 2 weeks to Mexico, I feel like yeah, I could stay here. So it's I don't know why this is with like my brain, but I'm like, but what I for sure know, actually, funny story, I felt not homesick, but when I the first time moved out of my hometown into like a bigger city in Germany, right? This was not cross border. And I feel like this was the first time where I experienced what you just described on like you're leaving your bubble, right? You're leaving your friends at the end of the day and you're going to a new city and you're trying out some new things. So actually maybe from this experience there I also felt like oh my god now they're doing these cool things but I'm not there with them. But I think what is important honestly is you choose yourself to do this path, right? And instead of like focusing on like, oh my gosh, I'm missing out on something, you're like, hold on, I'm living in a new country. Like, how many people are actually doing this, right? Like, it's an incredible privilege at the end of the day as well for us to be able to do this, right? And yes, it's hard, but you know what? Like, if you want to grow as a person, no matter what that is, it will always be hard, right? You can stay where you are, which is totally fine too. But if you want to grow, if you want to have new experience, if you want to do something else, maybe afterwards even find a better job, right? Because obviously, if you're just the beginner and then you have like, I worked abroad in Greece or I worked abroad in wherever, all the recruiters and the companies are like, oh, this is really cool. This person is like doing something which is not, quote, the normal. So I think what's important is don't focus too much on like what you're missing out on because it was your choice to do it, right? Rather than, so I think a great tip is always go on Facebook, good old Facebook. Nobody's using it, but for groups, honestly, Facebook groups are amazing. I'm not using Facebook for anything else but groups. There will be for sure expat groups on Facebook in no matter where you go, right? Just go in there. Everybody has the same struggles as you do. They do not have friends too, and they're more, they're very happy to meet with you. And I think what's also very powerful is honestly, like Zoom and everything else we have to actually connect with your friends, right? Like my best friend, he lives in Germany and we didn't see each other for, like for I don't know how many years, to be honest, because there was always something going on, but he's still my best friend, right? We're connecting, we're calling. So it's not that you're like giving up your entire life and you never talk to these people again. I think it's more about like, I'm changing the location, but that doesn't necessarily change a thing. Yeah, we can't see each other in person, but at the end of the day, right, if they're really good friends, they will be your friends even if you leave. And if they're not that good friends, that's totally fine too. You will find other friends in the other place, right? For example, like Linda and me, we have been friends before we even both moved to Malta. That was more like of a coincidence that we ended up in the same place, and we're still friends even though we now live in different countries again.
And I think by time we'll probably see each other more now that we live in different places, because
I'm
you have
sure.
to take time to do it. I experienced, for me, when I moved from one place in Denmark and then had to study, so I moved to Copenhagen. That's all my friends back home. They were like, "Oh, Linda, she's just in Copenhagen. Like we don't have to check up on her because she's still in Denmark, so we know what she's doing." But then when I moved abroad to France for the first time, I moved out, it was like they were like, "Oh, wait, she's in a different country. We have to check up on her. We have to call her and text her and do an effort." And it's funny because the travel, I spoke to one of my recruiters a few weeks back, and she said, "You shouldn't calculate in kilometers. You should calculate in time." And
Mm.
as long as you live within Europe on one continent, it
Easy.
is true. Because from Copenhagen with public transport to where the island in south of Denmark where my dad lives, it takes up to 6 hours. From here, like from France, south of France to Denmark, it's 2.5 hours. And then if I am smart and catching the fast train or renting a car, I can be at my dad's at the same time as taking public transport within a country. Like it's just calculating time. And now COVID has hit, so yes, we do have longer planes, and we might have to take D routes compared with what we saw before COVID, and we can't promise that's coming back, but still calculating in time instead of and worth like that, and see what you can spend your time on as well when you're traveling. So for me, living within Europe has never been. I have a little bit of the same as you, Sarah. Like I can always, I go to city and I'm like, okay, I could see myself live here. Like that wouldn't be. And then I go to other cities where I'm like, I'm not sure this is my favorite,
Yeah.
but I'm here now, so I better just enjoy it.
Mhm.
But coming a little bit back to the homesickness, I think it's right. Like go and meet other people. See if you can do with groups. You know, there's all sorts of groups of either your own nationality in the different countries, because you will find that there is communities that speaks your language in almost any country and city in the world. Smaller or bigger, but you will experience that. Um, but I think my homesickness this time around was really big. And I was not homesick to Denmark. I was homesick to Malta. And that was what I found really strange, because I've been thinking about leaving Malta for the last 2 years. I mean, I came there to stay there maybe 10 months to take my education, and it ended up being there 5 years. So, but I was finding myself homesick to Malta because that was where my everyday life was, even though I knew that I was going to move. Um, and my mindset, I knew France as well. So France and this area was not new to me, but I still found myself thinking, what am I doing? Like in the middle of a pandemic, I can't see anybody here. I should just have stayed. What am I doing? And I think for most people, that's what they will experience. Do
Yeah.
you have maybe a few tips on how you can get quickly integrated in a culture? Should you go for the food? Should you go for the language? Like, do you have some goodies for us there?
Actually, tip number one, go on YouTube. I mean, this sounds strange now, but seriously, there's so many, and choose the funny videos, right? Don't go on YouTube and be like, I need to get to know all the tax system in the new country I go in, because then you will like run away because nobody understands that no matter where you go, right? But there's so many funny YouTubers out there and funny videos on like most probably even comparing your country with the country you're going to, right? So I mean, there's so many hilarious videos, for example, from Germany and the US, for example, right? So, but if you go, I'm sure there's a video for like Denmark and Italy and Denmark and Greece and I don't know. So, and these videos are really funny. I mean, not all of it is true, right? It's a bit exaggerated, but honestly, most of the things are kind of true. They're like, they really help you get into the culture, and there are also some fun videos on like things you should not do. These are the most important things, because even like with greeting people or like how to tip in a restaurant, like really where you think, well, really, do I need to know this? Yes. I mean, honestly, these are like the small things which make the difference at the end of the day. So, tip number one is definitely YouTube. Another thing is just walk around the city, walk around the neighborhood where you landed, and really try to go. I mean, right now I know it's hard if the cafes are open wherever you go, or hopefully whenever they will back open, right? Just go in there, just like see how the people live there, right? Just like observe the people, just go for longer walks instead of taking the tube, or like just try to really observe the new area and how people what they do. And then what Linda mentioned is also really good. If you are in an office, that's amazing because you meet people. In case there's no office, or maybe during the weekends, always go to like co-working spaces, because they also have really cool events, right? It's not only to like co-work, but they're like events, and these are all very open-minded people because they always welcome everyone. So I think these would be like 3 tips to really make it easy. And don't be afraid of asking people. Honestly, if you don't understand something, just ask them like, hey, I'm new here. I have no idea why this is happening like this. Can you explain it to me? And I'm sure a lot of people, if not everyone, is happy to like explain it to you and really welcome you to the country.
No, those are really good points. I found myself the first time around when I moved out of Denmark. So I moved to France, and I found a lot of Danish people as friends. But the problem when you are living like you and me, moving around, working from anywhere, I found that when you make friends with other people who does the same, you kind of lose a lot of friends, in the sense of expats come and go.
Yep.
So what I tried to really make a point in Malta was also to have some friends that were Maltese. They could obviously get up and leave as well, but they were more likely to stay because they had their family and friends there, and maybe they already been abroad, so they came back home. I tried to do the same in France. Get some French or people who were at least people who were settled here, who's not up and leave really fast, because it can be, oh, the amount of leaving parties I hosted, you hosted. I know. um so for that, I will say that's just at least a tip that I kind of
Mhm.
made my own, is to find some locals, also because their moms probably are amazing chefs and will cook you good food.
That is true. And honestly, it's also important for whenever, so at least for me, and I know it's the same for you, Linda, if I move to a new place, I want to know how this place works, right? Like, how do the people interact? How do they do things? Like, whatever. I mean, here in Austria, you might think Germany and Austria are same. Well, actually, no. Seriously, like, even like the vegetables. I mean, it's hilarious. I'm obviously fluent in German because it's my native language, but even like the vegetables in the supermarket, they are all called differently. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, what is this? Right? I saw that it's like a tomato, but like the sign was totally different. And I'm like, I mean, they all speak German here, but I'm still lost. But now it's hilarious because now even when I see like the ads on TV or somewhere else, I can now understand why they do it that way, right? For example, in Germany, the at word, if you would do it that way, everyone would be like, really? What is this? Right? But in Austria, it literally works. And the same thing with like Malta, Linda, most probably you and I, sometimes we're like, why? Why is this? But then when you get to know the Maltese or the Austrian, whoever, you then understand, oh, that is why. Well, that makes sense, right? And I think it's this cool like connection to the locals. And, I feel like wherever you and I most probably will move in the future, because I'm sure it's not my last country. Austria is not my last country. I will always leave a piece of me in the country, but I will also take some of the culture with me, right? Like no matter where I go. And I think this is the beauty. And then it's just so much more fun. And if you then travel abroad and meet someone from Malta, I'm like, oh my God, I met a Maltese person in Mexico, right? And then you have something to talk about with strangers.
This is really funny because when I moved back from France the first time around, back to Denmark, and anybody who talked about going on holiday in France or moving there, I was like insanely jealous. Like, obviously not to the mean point, but I kind of felt this like, that's my place. Like, that's mine. And now when I'm sending candidates to Malta, I found myself being jealous of them experiencing Malta for the first time.
I know this. You have to do this.
Yeah, it's like, oh, yeah, but and that's my street. Like, I used to live, you know, and I find myself like, I want to give insane amounts of tips and tricks and my favorite places, and I also realized like, okay, maybe leave them to experience their own. I cannot just want to put all my experience on them. So it's very true. Like, I think you take some with you, and you know you get a little bit of pride of that country when you
Totally.
live there for a certain amount of time. I mean, I'm allowed to now. I feel like I'm allowed to speak badly of Malta and complain because I live there and my boyfriend is Maltese. But if other people do it, I tend to feel a bit offended.
Mhm.
And it's the same with France. If people speak ill of French people, I tend to really like be offended on their behalf because I feel like I took in some of the culture.
Yeah. For example,
Uh,
thing of like, for example, just really random on my Instagram story, not story, on my bio, I still have the Maltese flag because I'm like, yeah, I have been living in Malta and it is a part of me, right? And this
yeah,
flag
I
never.
just removed mine, and it was actually a really weird thing to do.
I'm sure it's like the German flag where I'm like, okay, whatever, Germany. I don't think I will go back, but that's where I am. I can't like change it. And then of course Malta because I've been living there, and now I added the Austrian flag, and I just feel like this is
Your
a piece
bio is just gonna be like one
of
line of flags in the end of your life.
flags you can put in this bio. So when the bio stops, I have to stop moving countries. Apparently, this.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna hold you up on that one in like 10, 20 years.
Yeah, and
Um,
one quite thing. I think this is the important piece. What you mentioned in the beginning. This is the difference if you stay for 3 months or if you stay for like a year. Honestly, if you stay for 3 months, it's really cool and it's really exciting and all good, but it doesn't have the same effect on who you are and what you learn compared to when you really stay longer in a country, right? I mean, I wouldn't put. I don't know. I've been a lot of to Mexico, for example, also for work, but I wouldn't put a Mexican flag on my Instagram because I love Mexico, but I can't speak in behalf of Mexico because I have not is there, right? I feel like I can speak at least a bit in behalf of Malta, not all, of course, but I at least know the 4 years I've been there. I know how things work there, right? So, and this is really what changes you at the end of the day, longer in a place and really experience the ups and downs. I mean, it's not all
Yeah.
sunshine, we also
But
want to
it's
be
true.
honest. We're all like amazing,
The
but there's
first
like a lot of
the first half year to a year, both of us lived in Malta. Like we couldn't care less about the political system. And just before we moved, I remember every time we saw each other, we were talking about local politics and what was happening up and down in the country. And I think, like, I don't know, in my mind, I kind of connected as well. Like, when you're moving abroad, you got these 3 months. It's the same when you go outside of Europe and outside the Schengen. You have 3 months of being a tourist, and
Mhm.
after those 3 months, you have to register. So for me, that's kind of also a saying, like, there must be a reason they chose these 3 months, because in three
Right.
months, you're still kind of a tourist and a newbie in the country. And after that, you're kind of starting to settle. And that's when you need to get your paperwork together. You know,
Yeah.
that's kind of my rule of thumb, if you can say so.
Or that makes total sense, honestly. Yeah. Oh, it's so
So
cool. I mean, now I'm like a new country. I mean, I just moved here, but
give it a little more than 6 months, Sarah.
true. Okay.
Can we maybe open up for Pandora's box and ask, do you have an idea where you're going next? Or
I mean, like there are 1,000 ideas, as Linda might know. My brain is always going to, offer a lot of options. So I honestly think it depends on the situation, to be honest, right? I mean, I'm not planning to move within the next year or maybe year and a half, to be honest. I mean, well, never say never. It could change, but like generally, I don't think I'm going to move because I just moved here like 7 months ago or something. And also because of COVID and all the craziness, it will take some time to actually, settle and everyone can be like actually safe. Um, I really want to move outside of Europe for some time. And there we have like in my head, there are like two options for right now. It's either Mexico. I've been talking about this forever. Or it's kind of the other side. It's more like Singapore, Indonesia, somewhere in Asia. So I'm not sure if it's right or left side, but I know that I want to move outside of the Europe for some years. I'm not sure if I necessarily want to live outside of the Europe like long term. Nobody knows, but when I would come back within Europe, I would totally love to either move to Portugal or to Spain, to Barcelona, for example. So these are like, I really like right now being in Austria with the mountains and everything. But in my heart, I'm more of like a Southern Europe somewhere person.
oh, that's nice. Like we're talking about, like, Portugal has always been a place in Europe that if I shouldn't live in south of France, then Portugal would be, yeah.
Yeah.
That's just so livable. I find it so livable. But then I was actually on my way, I think 6, 7 years ago, to move to Kuala Lumpur, so I can totally follow that.
Yeah.
So if you're going there, count
Yep.
me in. I'm coming visiting. All right, so that's super exciting. Yeah, well, I just wanted to touch base with you, and maybe I'll invite you back at some point. I don't want to make this much longer than 40
Yep.
minutes. So we already been talking for 40 minutes. But thank you so much for joining. Do you have just one last one, to be proper global? What skills would you describe that you would need? So for me to apply for a job in an international company back in Denmark, now I've been abroad and I come
Mhm.
back and I can describe myself as a global person. What skills would I need to have gained?
Yeah. So I think the top one skill is curiosity. It might sound a bit weird, but curiosity about anything. The second thing is adapt adaptability. Wow, I can't even.
It's morning, it's Friday morning.
You know what I mean? Like being flexible, all the things. And number three is to always find a solution for real, because you have to
Problem
find.
solving.
Yeah, there are problems everywhere. But if you lived abroad, you have to find a solution because you're abroad. Like, there's not necessarily a lot of people who can help you do it. So I think these are the top three skills you gain when you like live abroad and work abroad.
I love the part of curiosity, especially like asking question. You mentioned it earlier as well. And I take that in now, and I've been doing that for a while because I realize, like, I love when people ask me questions,
Mhm.
So just
Yeah.
getting the conversation going. But sometimes I also or I used to feel maybe some questions are not allowed to be asked, and there's always like a line in between what can I ask this person and what can I not.
Yeah.
Um, and do you have any tips there? Like if you meet people from another culture, and like religion is always a very sore subject, for instance, but
Mhm.
I tend to now just ask the questions. You can formulate them in a polite way. So do you
Exactly.
think that's okay? Like where's the boundaries?
Yeah, honestly, I think that's a great point. I'm all for asking all the questions you have, but obviously in a non-judging way, right? And be honest with the people. Say, hey, I'm new to this culture. I'm new to this country. This is different from what I know back home. And I'm actually really interested in why this works like this, right? If you ask a question like this, everyone's like, oh, sure. But if you ask like, why do you do that? Why do you wear this? Or why is this? Then it's like really offending the other person. But if it comes from a place of curiosity, then I'm sure everybody's happy to like walk you through and explain you why things are like this. And then I think this is also like a great start of a good conversation with other people.
Yeah, no, that's a super good point. Like, I think that's a very good takeaway. In all, thank you so much. I
Yeah.
asked you to give a few tips and tricks here, so that's really nice. Um, I hope you'll be open to come back, maybe at a
Oh,
later point. Maybe we catch you
okay.
somewhere in the world.
Any day.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.